And then, like a falling star, a blazing fireball of light and motion shot down in front of Dalinar. It crashed into the ground, sending out a ring of stormlight like white smoke. At the center, a figure in blue crouched with one hand on the stones, the other clutching a glowing shard blade. His eyes of fire with a light that somehow made the assassin seem dull by comparison, he wore the uniform of a bridgeman and bore the glyphs of slavery on his forehead. The expanding ring of smoky light faded, save for a large glyph, a sword-like shape, which remained for a brief moment before puffing away.
You sent him to the sky to die, assassin. But the sky and the winds are mine. I claim them, as I now claim your life.
Kaladin let the stormlight evaporate before him. He was running low. His frantic flight across the plains had drained him. How shocked he had been when the flare of light rising into the darkening sky above a lit plateau had turned out to be Dalinar himself, lashed to the sky by Szeth. Kaladin had caught him quickly and sent him back to the ground with a careful lashing of his own. Ahead, Szeth stumbled away from the princeling, holding out his sword wardingly toward Kaladin, eyes wide and lips trembling. Szeth looked horrified.
Good.
Dalinar finally landed on the plateau with a soft step, and Kaladin's lashing ran out.
Seek shelter. I flew over a storm on my way here. A big one. Coming from the west.
We're in the process of withdrawing.
Hurry. I will deal with our friend.
Kaladin?
Kaladin turned, glancing at the High Prince who stood tall, despite cradling one arm against his chest. Dalinar met his eyes.
You are what I've been looking for.
Yes. Finally.
Kaladin turned and strode toward the assassin. He passed Bridge 4 in a tight formation.
Give him light!
The men threw something down before Kaladin, blue lanterns lit by oversized gems that had lasted the weeping.
Bless them.
Stormlight streamed up as he passed, filling him. With a sinking feeling, however, he noticed two corpses with burned-out eyes at their feet. Payton and Mart. F clutched his brother's body. Other bridgemen had lost limbs.
No more. I'll lose no further men to this monster. You ready, Syl?
Of course! I'm not the one we've been waiting on.
Burning with stormlight, enraged and alight, Kaladin launched himself at the assassin and met him blade against blade. Kaladin shot into the air after the assassin. The shattered plains fell away beneath him. Fallen gemstones twinkled across the plateau, abandoned where tents had blown down or soldiers had fallen. They illuminated not only the central plateau, but three others around it and one more beyond, one that looked oddly circular from above. The armies gathered on that one. Small lumps dotted the others like freckles.
Corpses. So many.
Kaladin looked toward the sky. He was free once again. Wind surged beneath him, seeming to lift him, propel him, carry him. His shard blade shattered into mist, and Syl zipped out, becoming a ribbon of light that spun around him as he flew.
And Syl lives!
He still felt euphoric about that. When he'd asked on their flight out why she wasn't dead, her response had been simple.
I was only as dead as your oaths, Kaladin.
Kaladin continued upward, out of the path of the oncoming storms. He could see those distinctly from this vantage, two of them, one rolling from the west and bursting with red lightning, the other approaching more quickly from the east with a dark gray storm wall. They were going to collide.
A high storm. The red storm is from the Pashendi, but why is there a high storm coming? This isn't the time for one.
My father. He brought the storm, rushing its pace. He's broken, Kaladin. He doesn't think any of this should be happening. He wants to end it all, wash everyone away, and try to hide from the future.
Her father? Does that mean the Stormfather wants us dead? Great.
The assassin disappeared above, vanishing into the dark clouds. Kaladin gritted his teeth, lashing himself upward again for more acceleration. He shot into the clouds, and all around him became featureless gray. He kept watch for glimmers of light to announce the assassin coming for him. He might not have much warning. The area around him lightened.
Is that him?
Kaladin extended his hand to the side, and Syl formed into the blade immediately.
Not 10 heartbeats?
Not when I'm here with you, ready. The delay is primarily something of the dead. They need to be revived each time.
Kaladin burst out of the clouds and into the sunlight. He'd forgotten that it was still daytime. Here, far above the earthy darkness of war, the sunlight beat upon the cover of clouds, making them glow with pale beauty. The thin air was frigid, but raging stormlight inside him made that easy to ignore. The assassin hovered nearby, toes pointed downward, head bowed, silvery shard blade held to the side. Kaladin lashed himself so that he stopped, then sank level with the assassin.
I am Szeth, son Valado! Truthless! Truthless! You have stolen honor blades! It is the only explanation!
Storms.
Kaladin had always imagined the assassin in white as a calm, cold killer. This was something different.
I possess no such weapon, and I don't know why it would matter if I did.
I hear your lies! I know them!
Szeth shot forward, sword out. Kaladin lashed himself to the side, jerking out of the way. He swiped with his blade, but didn't come close to connecting.
I should have practiced more with the sword.
Oh, that's right. You probably want me to be a spear, don't you?
The weapon fuzzed to mist, then elongated and grew into the shape of a silvery spear, with glowing, swirling glyphs along the sharpened sides of the spearhead. Szeth twisted in the air, lashing himself back into a hovering position. He looked at the spear, then seemed to tremble.
No, truthless. I am truthless. No questions.
Stormlight streaming from his mouth, Szeth threw his head back. Storms crashed together beneath Kaladin. The clouds broke apart, black, red, and gray mingling in enormous swirls, lightning arcing among them. It seemed to be Ahara Etiam again, the ending of all things. Above all this, atop the world, Kaladin fought for his life. Szeth flew by in a sweeping flash of silvery metal. Kaladin deflected the blow, the spear in his hand vibrating. Szeth continued on, passing him, and Kaladin lashed himself in that direction. They fell westward, skimming the tops of the clouds, though to Kaladin's eyes that direction was down. He fell with his spear aimed, point straight toward the murderous shin. Szeth jerked left, and Kaladin followed, quickly lashing himself that way. Violent, churning, angry clouds mixed beneath him. The two storms seemed to be fighting. The lightning that lit them was like thrown punches. Near Kaladin, a large stone churned up through the clouds, spinning vapors across its length. It breached in the light like a leviathan, then sank back into the clouds.
Stormfather?
He was hundreds, perhaps thousands of feet in the air.
What kind of violence is happening below if boulders are being thrown this high?
Kaladin lashed himself toward Szeth, picking up speed, moving along the top surface of the storms. He drew close, then eased back, letting his acceleration match that of Szeth, so they flew side by side. Kaladin drove his spear toward the assassin. Szeth parried deftly, shard blade held in one hand while supporting the blade from behind with the other, diverting Kaladin's thrust to the side.
The Knight's Radiance cannot have returned!
They have! They're going to kill you!
He lashed himself slightly to the side as he swung, twisting in the air and sweeping toward Szeth. Szeth jerked upward, however, passing over Kaladin's spear. As they continued to fall through the air, clouds just beside them, Szeth dove inward and struck. Kaladin barely lashed himself away in time. Szeth dove past him, disappearing into the clouds below, becoming just a shadow. Kaladin tried to trace that shadow, but failed. Szeth burst up beside Kaladin a second later, striking with 3 quick blows. One took Kaladin in the arm, and he dropped Syl.
Damnation!
He lashed himself back away from Szeth, then forced Stormlight into his graying, lifeless hand. With an effort, he made the color return, but Szeth was already upon him with an airborne lunge. Mist formed in Kaladin's left hand as he raised it toward, and a silvery shield appeared, glowing with soft light. Szeth's blade deflected away. Strength returned to Kaladin's right hand. The severing healed, but forcing that much stormlight through it left him feeling drained. He fell away from Szeth, trying to keep his distance, but the assassin kept on him, jerking each direction that Kaladin did as he tried to escape.
You are new at this. You cannot fight me. I will win.
Szeth zipped forward, and Syl formed into a spear in Kaladin's hands again. She seemed to be able to anticipate the weapon he wanted. Szeth slammed his weapon against Syl. It brought them face to face as they tumbled, eye to eye, their lashings pulling them along the clouds.
I always win!
You're wrong about me. I'm not new to this.
You only just acquired your abilities.
No. The wind is mine. The sky is mine. They have been mine since childhood. You are the trespasser here, not me.
They broke apart, Kaladin throwing the assassin backward. He stopped thinking so much about his lashings, about what he should be doing. Instead, he let himself be. He dove for Szeth. Coat flapping, spear pointed for the man's heart. Szeth got out of the way, but Kaladin dropped the spear and swung his hand in a great arc. Syl formed an axe-head halberd. It came within inches of Szeth's face.
Damnation!
The assassin responded with his blade. A shield was in Kaladin's hand a split second later, and he slammed away the attack. Syl shattered even as he did so, forming back into a sword as Kaladin thrust forward with empty hands. The sword appeared, and the weapon bit deeply into Szeth's shoulder. Kaladin twisted his blade, pulling it out of the assassin's flesh, then tried a backhand to end the man permanently. Szeth was too fast. He lashed himself backward, forcing Kaladin to follow, piling on lashing after lashing. Szeth's hand still worked. The strike to the shoulder hadn't fully severed the soul leading to the arm, and Kaladin's stormlight was running out. Szeth's looked even lower, fortunately. The assassin seemed to be using it up at a much faster rate than Kaladin, judging by the decreased glow around him. Indeed, he didn't try to heal his shoulder, which would have required a lot of light, but continued to flee, jerking back and forth, trying to outrun Kaladin. A shadowy battle continued below, a tangle of lightning, winds, and spinning clouds. As Kaladin chased Szeth, something gargantuan moved beneath the clouds, a shadow the size of a city. A second later, the top of an entire plateau broke through the dark clouds, twisting slowly as if it had been thrown upward from below. Szeth almost ran into it. Instead, he lashed upward enough to crest it, then landed on the surface. He ran along it as it turned lethargically in the air, its momentum running out. Kaladin landed behind him, though he retained most of a lashing upward, keeping himself light. He ran up the side of the plateau, heading almost directly upward toward the sky, dodging to the side as Szeth suddenly twisted and cut through a rock formation, sending boulders tumbling downward. The plateau began to tumble back down toward the ground. Szeth reached the peak and threw himself off, and Kaladin followed shortly thereafter, launching from the stone surface, which sank like a dying ship into the roiling clouds. They continued their chase, but Szeth did it falling backward along the storm top, his eyes on Kaladin, wild eyes.
You're trying to convince me? You can't be one of them!
You've seen that I am!
The Voidbringers are back! They can't be! I am truthless! I need not fight you! You are not my target! I have work to do! I obey!
He turned and lashed himself downward, into the clouds, down toward the plateau where Dalinar had gone. Kaladin followed Szeth into the storm, diving into the blackness, falling amid the churning winds and the blasting lightning. Wind attacked him, tossing him about, and no lashings could prevent this.
I might be master of the winds, but storms are another thing.
Take care. My father hates you. This is his domain, and it is mixed with something even more terrible. Another storm. Their storm.
Nevertheless, the high storms were the source of stormlight, and being in here energized Kaladin. His reserves of stormlight burst to light, as they obviously did for Szeth. The assassin suddenly reappeared in a stark white explosion that zoomed through the maelstrom toward the plateaus. Kaladin lashed himself after Szeth. Lightning of a dozen colors flashed around him. Red, violet, white, yellow. Rain soaked him. Rocks spun past him. Szeth moved along the plateaus, coursing just above them, and Kaladin followed with difficulty. The churning wind was tough to navigate, and the darkness was near absolute. Flashes lit the plains in fitful bursts. Fortunately, Szeth's glow could not be hidden, and Kaladin kept his attention on that blazing beacon.
Faster!
Just as Zyle had taught weeks ago, Szeth didn't need to defeat Kaladin to win. He just had to get to those Kaladin protected.
Faster!
A burst of lightning illuminated the battle plateaus, and beyond them, Kaladin caught a glimpse of the army. Thousands of men huddled on the large circular plateau. Many hunkered down, others panicked. The lightning was gone in a moment, and the land became dark again, though Kaladin had seen enough to know this was a disaster, a cataclysm. Men being blown off the edge, others crushed by falling rocks. In minutes, the army would be gone.
Storms!
Kaladin wasn't even certain if he could survive this nexus of destruction. Szeth crashed down among them, a glowing light amid the blackness, as Kaladin lashed himself down in that direction. Lightning struck again. Its light revealed Szeth standing on an empty plateau, baffled.
The army is gone!
Szeth had just screamed words at Kaladin, but they were lost in the tempest. Rocks crashed down around them, ripped from somewhere distant. Kaladin was sure he heard terrible screams over the winds, as red spren he'd never seen before, like small meteors trailing light behind them, zipped around him.
How?
Kaladin's answer was to strike with his blade. Szeth parried violently, and they clashed, two glowing figures in the blackness.
I know this column! I have seen its light before! They went to the city, didn't they?
The assassin launched himself into the air. Kaladin was all too eager to follow. He wanted out of this tempest. Szeth streamed away, heading westward away from the storm with the red lightning. Following a path of the common high storm, that alone was dangerous enough. Kaladin gave chase, but that proved difficult in the buffeting winds. It wasn't that they served Szeth more than Kaladin. The tempest was simply unpredictable. They'd shove him one way and Szeth another.
What happens if I lose him? He knows where Dalinar went. I don't. I can't protect him if I can't find the man.
Unfortunately, the chase through this darkness favored the person who was trying to escape. Slowly, Szeth pulled ahead. Kaladin tried to follow, but a surge of wind drove him in the wrong direction. Lashings didn't really let him fly. He couldn't resist such unpredictable winds. They controlled him.
No!
Szeth's glowing form dwindled.
No!
He'd almost lost sight. Syl spun into the air in front of him, but he was still carrying the spear.
What?
Another one, then another. Ribbons of light, occasionally taking the shapes of young women or men. Wind spread. A dozen or more spun around him, leaving trails of light, their laughter somehow strong over the sounds of the storm.
There! He's ahead!
Kaladin lashed himself through the tempest toward him, jerking one way, then the other. Dodging blitzes of lightning, ducking under hurled boulders, blinking away the sheets of driven rain. A whirlwind of chaos. And ahead,
White?
the storm wall. Szeth burst free of the storm's very front. Through the mess of water and debris, Kaladin could just barely make out the assassin, turning around to look backward, his posture confident.
He thinks he's lost me.
Kaladin exploded out of the storm wall, surrounded by windspren that spiraled away in a pattern of light. He drove his spear toward Szeth, who parried hastily, his eyes wide.
Impossible!
Kaladin spun around and slashed his spear, which became a sword through Szeth's foot. The assassin lurched away along the length of the storm wall. Both Szeth and Kaladin continued to fall westward, just in front of the wall of water and debris. Beneath them, the land passed in a blur. The two storms had finally separated, and the high storm was moving along its normal path, east to west. The shattered plains were soon left behind, giving way to rolling hills. As Kaladin chased, Szeth spun and fell backward, attacking, though Syl became a shield to block. Kaladin swung down, and a hammer appeared in his hand, crashing against Szeth's shoulder. As Stormlight tried to heal the assassin, Kaladin pulled in close. and slammed his hand against Szeth's stomach, a knife appearing there and digging deeply into the skin. He sought the spine. Szeth frantically lashed himself farther backward, pulling out of Kaladin's grip. Kaladin followed. Boulders churned in the storm wall, which was now the ground from Kaladin's perspective. He had to repeatedly adjust his lashing to stay in the right place, just ahead of the storm. Kaladin leaped on churning boulders as they appeared, pursuing Szeth, who fell wildly, his clothing flapping. Windsprint formed a halo around Kaladin, zipping in and out, spiraling, spinning around his arms and legs. The proximity of the storm kept his stormlight stoked, never letting it grow dim. Szeth slowed, his wounds healing. He hung in front of the crashing storm wall, holding his sword before him. He met Kaladin's eyes.
An ending, then.
Kaladin drove forward, Syl forming a spear in his fingers, the most familiar weapon. Szeth attacked in a sequence, a relentless blur of strikes. Kaladin blocked each one. He ended with his spear against the hilt of Szeth's blade, pressing the two together, mere inches from the assassin's face.
It's actually true.
Yes.
Szeth nodded, and the edge of tension seemed to fade from him, replaced by an emptiness in his eyes.
Then I was right all along. I was never truthless. I could have stopped the murders at any time.
I don't know what that means, but you never had to kill.
My orders...
Excuses! If that's why you murdered, then you're not the evil man I assumed. You're a coward instead.
Szeth looked him in the eyes, then nodded. He pushed Kaladin back, then moved to swing. Kaladin drove his hands forward, forming Syl into a sword. He expected a parry. The move was intended to draw Szeth out of his attack pattern. Szeth did not parry. He just closed his eyes to accept the attack. In that instant, for reasons he could not have articulated, pity, perhaps, Kaladin diverted his blow, driving his blade through Szeth's wrist. The skin grayed, flashing with reflected lightning. The sword tumbled from the assassin's fingers, then dulled as it plummeted. The glow fled the assassin's form. All his stormlight vanished in a puff. All lashings vanished. Szeth started to fall.
Get that sword! Grab it!
The assassin!
He has released the bond! He is nothing without that sword! It must not be lost!
Kaladin dove after the blade, passing Szeth, who tumbled through the air like a rag doll, buffeted by winds toward the storm wall. Kaladin furiously lashed himself downward, snatching the blade just before the storm consumed it. Nearby, the assassin dropped past him into the storm and was swallowed up, leaving Kaladin with the haunting image of Szeth's limp silhouette being driven into a plateau below with all the Tempest's force.